Folks, welcome to Everything Pro Wrestling. Everything Pro Wrestling is a show by the fans, for the fans. I'm your host, Conrad Cushman, and I'm being joined today by another Buffalo local. So make sure you guys show some respect. I know we lost this week, but we're going to still show some respect. Chris, how are you doing? So I feel like I shouldn't even introduce you. Like you're the master of ceremonies. You're the ring announcer. He's in comedies. He acts. He does it all. He does it all.
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for having me, and thank everybody for checking it out. And we already got people in the chat and everything, so that's awesome. And I am a Bills fan, but in case somebody sees it, yes, I am wearing a Las Vegas Raiders shirt.
Boo!
I was recently there back in September. I had a friend who works for the organization, so I got to check out the new stadium and everything, and doing scouting for what I think the new Bill Stadium should look like. That's how I see it. Yes.
All right. As long as it's in the right part of town, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Switch it up. Good. That's pretty dope. Chris, you have a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about in all of this. So if anybody comes in and you guys are just checking it out, make sure you tell everybody, like the video on YouTube, give us a follow on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to this, and check out everything for Chris. I'm going to have links in the bottom afterwards, and you guys can go check out Chris and see any of his work that you may be interested in. Chris, it's Thanksgiving week, and we've got a lot to be thankful for. So thank you for, number one, coming on the show. You've been somebody who I've had my eye on for a long time, just because when I go think of like local independent wrestling in Buffalo, New York, you're the first face that I usually think of. Wrestlers come and go, but I've seen your face for a long, long time, and like all the posters, the pictures, the background. And it's crazy. How did you get into this crazy world that we call pro wrestling? You can start from the beginning, or you can start from ring announcing days.
Well, we'll do some backstory. First off, as a fan, I started really getting into it in 95, 94, 95. I can remember like memories as a child. Like my mom took me to the Niagara Falls Convention Center in 93, Undertaker versus Yokozuna and all that fun stuff. But I can remember like 1995 was, I think, the first time I fell in love with wrestling. And we didn't have cable, but we had the rabbit ears. And with those rabbit ears, man, you could get so much wrestling. It was insane. I would get WWF Superstars. I'd get the Canadian version of WWF Superstars. I would get a replay of Nitro that was on some random Canadian station on Sundays. And I would get WCW Pro, which I cannot, if I remember correctly, aired on a Christian station. Don't know why it did, but it did. And then there was Channel 67. I've talked about this on my other podcasts. Channel 67 was the holy grail for me. On Saturdays, they would air Smoky Mountain, USWA, and ECW.
Was that Empire? We're talking local talk now.
No. So Empire was on cable. So this was 67, also known as America One, WNGS. America One was synonymous with showing like independent wrestling and just kind of off the grid type wrestling and all that. Like they had for years, they had Wild Side on and all that. So
I don't know if you youngsters in the chat know, but it was a struggle to watch like ECW and the stuff he's talking about. It's not as abundant as it is today.
So it was just so cool to have like a Saturday filled with programming like that. But yeah, so no, I got in love, fell in love with wrestling that. And I dabbled in playing football and lacrosse, but I'm no fool. I knew I wasn't really an athlete. And I really always wanted to get into wrestling. But I didn't know what I should do or what I want to do. Like, I grew up watching the announcers, but I think commentary guys like Tony Schiavone, Joey Styles, those were guys that kind of like, oh yeah, what they do is cool. So now I'm in college and I started a wrestling talk radio show. And while I'm also in college, I'm doing play-by-play for Buffalo State football, Buffalo State basketball. I'm doing, hockey as well. And I started doing this wrestling talk radio show, and we started to meet some people, and I met some people from the independent scene and kind of getting cordial with people. And we interviewed a lot of great people on that podcast. I remember one time, so that was a radio show, but people on that radio show. And then I graduated college in 2009. And 2010, some people I knew were like, "Hey, you want to get in wrestling? Give this guy your resume. Come to this show." And I started going to MFW, Maximum Force Wrestling, which was ran by a guy named Primal Warpath, who did like an Ultimate Warrior-esque gimmick. And started getting in there, setting up chairs, and kind of was doing some very minimal ref spots. And then I saw a posting for Craigslist to be the ring announcer for BCW, which is Buffalo Championship Wrestling. Messaged the guy really liked that I had an actual media background, and I knew wrestling. And it just kicked off from there. And 10-year anniversary is a couple weeks away, December 8th, 2011. I made my ring announcing debut. Brody Lee was the first guy I ever ring announced in the ring. He went against Jordan Lennox, and so that was and from there it's now I work for like 5 promotions, and I also do MMA and kickboxing and all that. So
that is incredible, the background and everything that you have going along with it. Like that's so interesting, because I used to try to get into a lot of that stuff. So it's funny, we're not too far off in age, I don't think. And I used to look up like the BCW page, and I remember seeing people like Beth Phoenix. I'm like, Beth Phoenix wrestled locally here? Like, that's crazy. Angelina Love wrestled locally here? That's crazy to me. Like, I never thought Brody Lee even. That's really cool, though, that was the first person you ever ring announced for. That's rest in peace to Brody Lee.
Yeah.
We cover a lot of AEW on the channel, so I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate that. I see a bunch of people saying that it's awesome to see you in the chat on YouTube. Thank you, B-Boy Skyline. I appreciate that. So growing up, did you have favorite like wrestling personalities per se? Like, was there someone that you just automatically like gravitated towards?
There's a couple. Sting, loved Sting.
Wait, and honestly, wait. Which Sting? Because there's different versions.
This is where I was leading it. I'm a Surfer Sting guy. Yes, I like Crow Sting. Crow Sting was cool, but I'm a Surfer Sting guy. I love Surfer
wrong
Sting.
With that.
But Sting, Bret Hart was definitely one I really liked, and I think that had to do. There's this thing I brought it up before in another podcast. It's called border culture, and like you know it because we're very similar age, but a lot of people that live in border cities like Buffalo and Detroit and Seattle. Kids probably don't experience it now, but when we were growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, we could get television from Canada. It was on cable packages, or it was if you had the rabbit ears. And I got a lot of Canadian TV, and Bret Hart is loved. Like, at least in the 90s, he's on everything. He's on hoagie commercials, pizza commercials. And they were, like I said, there was a Canadian version of Superstars, which was very Bret Hart centric almost every episode. So got exposed to a lot of Bret Hart, and I dug it, So Bret Hart and Sting, and there are some others that, as time goes on, like Roddy Piper and Raven, a few others, but Bret Hart and Sting were the first two to make me like, go, all right, wrestling's cool.
Definitely. Here we go with the questions already. I'm going to try to make these make sense, guys. So if I skip yours, I'm coming back to it. I promise. I'm going to start from Azan's here. Azan wants to know, what's your favorite feud with Sting?
So it's Surfer Sting era, and it's probably Vader. You got White Castle of Fear, and those Sting Vader matches don't get talked about enough. It's honestly, I think it's Vader at his prime, and I think it's Sting just firing on all cylinders.
I don't think a lot of people know, but I love like 1992 WCW. There was just something special about, I know the Bill Watts over the top rule. I hated that too. Like, no over the top rope, no jumping off the top rope stuff was kind of hot garbage. But when they did things right in WCW back then, it was really good. And I have fond memories of Sting versus Vader, like you said. And I forgot there was a match where Sting like hit the ring post. I just remember this as a kid. Like, I was so young, and he bounced off the ring post, and him and Vader would just go at it. It was such a great feud back then.
When he gets him up for the vertical suplex, and it's such a big deal because like the whole match, Vader is just hammering and
so
crowd went nuts.
Yeah, I even love like Cactus Jack back then. Flying Brian Pillman was one of my favorites as a kid too. He was just dope. B-Boy Skyline said, what are some of your best moments from Nickel City Con? Jordan from the Superhero Alliance, if you know who that is.
So I've actually never been in Nickel City Con. I have performed comedy at similar, it was like Dragon Con, I think that was here a few years back in like 2015 or 14 or 15, but I've been in Nickel City Con, but I do know the Superhero Alliance. They're very cool. Probably some of the best cosplayers around with that, but they also do a lot of like charity events and all that, which is really cool.
Yeah. Jordan's definitely a part of that. And I know actually a couple other people who are involved in it from like high school and stuff. And it's really cool to see people like just do that stuff for kids and everything else. I love it personally. Like, it's just a good thing to see in the local area. Let's talk some comedy. I know this is everything pro wrestling, but
let's do it.
We switch it up, man. So where have you performed stand-up comedy in our city here?
Well, our city here, there's a lot. I've gotten to perform in some like bucket list venues, I guess you would say. Like I performed at the Trelf, which was really cool. I did it twice. I did an all comedy show at the Trelf, and then I did open up for my buddy who was like a traveling like acoustic singer from like North Carolina like years ago, and I did some stand up before he came on or whatever. So I did that. Sportsman's Tavern, I did a comedy show at one time too, and that's a very, for people not from Buffalo, it's a very cool like blues and like folk and that type of like venue, all that. I performed like Nietzsche's and Mr. Goodbar and Buff State's Rockwell Hall, which was really cool. I've performed at Helium Comedy Club. I mean, now I'm trying to think of all the places, but I've gotten to do a lot of the cool music venues. Haven't done the Tom Ballroom yet, so anyone ever catches that. But I've gotten to do a lot of the cool music venues, and I've performed in like so many bars and restaurants over the city and other places.
Yeah, no, that's great. The Trelf is amazing. I love going to see a lot of blues players and stuff. Like, just go there. Like, sometimes there's small, obscure people that not a lot of people would know. And it's always like so much fun, in my opinion, to go there and just listen to them play, because you get to feel like the experience more. It's like wrestling shows, kind of. You feel like the Ring of Honor has a different vibe than WWE, and Ring of Honor has a different vibe than going to your local indie. It just feels different. Like, you feel more up close and personal with people.
So the Trelf has this cool thing when you're an entertainer, you can sign the wall. And some of those names on there, and they necessarily didn't perform at the Trelf, but they like hung out at the Trelf after, because I can't remember if it was Kleinhans or Shays that the Trelf had a relationship with or whatever it may be, but like Prince was on there. So I made sure to sign my name very, very close to Prince.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Like, unbelievable that you got to perform in all those venues, and that's really, really good stuff. And I want to stay on comedy here for a second. Who are some of your like influences when it comes to comedy? There's such a wide, vast variety of people that you could be influenced by. Is there any one particular performer or television shows that you would say like, yeah, this is what I usually get my comedy from, or this is what inspired me to do it?
So I like it's weird because like I feel like the comedy I watch isn't always necessarily the comedy I do. Because I do kind of like witty banter. I'm a big fan of Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld. Like I watch Curb a lot. Like Curb Your Enthusiasm. I quote it daily almost. But like I like that. But my style is more like goofy, weird, like in your face. And with that, I get a lot of that from like Jim Brewer and believe it or not, Pauly Shore. I'm currently, I'm going to finish watching Son-in-Law for the millionth time today. It's Thanksgiving week, so you got to watch Son-in-Law.
That's okay, buddy. You're all right.
and I know there's a bunch of other ones I could say, but like, I kind of like my own thing too. Like I have crazy things that have happened to me and I tell stories, and then I also like make goofy, weird things. Like, you know, my thing is like, I'm not trying to like with my comedy is not meant to like offend like a certain this or certain that, you know. Some people do it. Mine thing is like, oh, look at this weird thing that happened to me, or how about this goofy idea I had, like, and it's a lot of self-deprecation humor too.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with that. Listen, I think as long as you're making people laugh, you're doing your job up there. And there's nothing wrong with that. I know that comedy's in this weird place with how society is right now, but it's really something fun that just influences your soul. And do you have like an all-time favorite comedian? Is it Jerry Seinfeld?
It's probably Jim Brewer. It's probably Jim Brewer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice. Now, have you gotten into acting and stuff? Because it seems like you're a jack of all trades. Like I said, you host events and everything else. Is your work more so in like doing the local movies that pop up here? Is it a specific genre? Are you in the theater, or it doesn't matter?
So I've done movies that have had connections through people outside of here. Like I actually haven't done a lot of like local like films. I have a friend who I was really good buddies with in college who moved to Los Angeles and became a filmmaker. And once in a while, there'll be an opportunity that I can do either remotely or whatever it may be. And I do it. We did a movie last year. It was actually it was a Christmas movie, and it was all on Zoom. And it was actually a pretty cool idea. I did that. I've also was in a trauma film. The Return of the Class of Nukem High. And there's a scene where I'm at a party. You see me a couple times, and like I think the most you see me is when I run out of the party when there's a fire, because I'm right next to Toxie. For some reason, the Toxic Avenger's there, and I'm running out of the party with them.
Hey, listen, you're in it, right? To win.
I don't act a lot, but I've gotten to do a couple funny, cool things. I have an IMDb page, so
legend. That's it.
Yeah.
That's solidified right there. Is there anything that you want to get into more so with acting? Like, is there another bucket list item that you haven't checked off yet that maybe you're like, I'd like to get into that?
I feel like I'd like to do a few more comedies, like, maybe like a kind of like a feature length comedy. Like, I've been kind of just this goofy like character. It's in there for 5 minutes or whatever. But I think it would be pretty cool to, actually like be like a role like, hey, the weird neighbor, but I have like a lot of dialogue.
Okay. Directors, write that down, or if you know someone, pass it along. Getting into your podcast stuff now.
Yeah.
Now, I know of your Rediscovering the Indies. I want to talk about that first.
Yes.
What is your inspiration behind that show, and what could you tell someone who's never listened to it before and why they should listen to it?
So it's a passion project of mine, and the pandemic kind of like made you like you weren't doing anything, so you're like, oh, it's time to do your passion project, right? And myself and Jonathan Ash, the co-host, we travel a lot together to wrestling shows. Jonathan Ash does mostly like a lot of executive producing, like he does a lot of production and all that. Works for GoPro Wrestling right now and does a lot of huge feds. But we travel a lot on the road together, and we would just talk about these like obscure, not obscure, but like these indie promotions from the 90s or the early 2000s and stories, and we're like, we should do this as a podcast. So basically what Rediscovering the Indies is you have all your history podcasts out there. You have your WCW podcast, your WWF podcast, WWE. You have your ECW podcast. You have Ring of Honor and TNA history podcast out there. But there wasn't anything focusing on independence. Like I scoured. There's nothing. So as far as history, there's a lot of current independent wrestling podcasts, but not like history. So we decide, hey, let's do it. And we once a month, we break down a topic. It's anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on the topic and all that, if we got to break it up into parts. And we talk about we've talked about stuff like XPW and the NWA title after they broke off from WCW, and Dale Gagner and the AWA, and a lot of fun stuff like that. We've done the ECWA Super 8s. We've talked about the history of the Super 8, which is really cool, and got a lot of support from ECWA on that. They were very grateful and very like supportive that we did that. And yeah, it's just been really cool. And we do every day on social media. We do this day in independent wrestling history, and it's usually like a title change or like a big match that happened, and on our social media. So just trying to, indie wrestling's so in right now, but I want people to know the history of it. And I think that's what we try to do.
Yeah, that's very important. To be honest, if anybody's looking for a recommendation for Rediscovering the Indies, I love the NWA one. the history where you guys were revisiting all of it, and you learn a lot about guys. I won't spoil it all, but like Chris Candido was NWA heavyweight champion. I don't think a lot of younger fans know that. Like, he was the NWA heavyweight champion in a time of like transition away from that WCW time period. So it makes things very interesting. Check out Chris's podcast. I promise you, you'll become a knowledgeable fan slowly but surely, and I respect that once it pops up. What do we got here? We got another question that just popped up. As someone who's been around the indies, Azan asks, what do you think about these really young superstars on the indie scene like Nick Wayne and Billy? Is
Billy Starks? It's Billy Starks.
Thank you.
So one of the cool things about independent wrestling now is there is so much of it, and there's so many promotions and promoters willing to take risk. And when I started, somebody, who was 16, 17, 18, you're probably not getting a match for a year or 2 or 3 years in training. And I don't know if like Nick Wayne or Billy Starks have trained for a few years before they had their first match, but they're getting a lot of great opportunities at a young age, and they're taking advantage of it. Nick Wayne is the son of Buddy Wayne, and Buddy Wayne was a very, very solid worker, very good worker. And Billy Starks is like, I think she's 17, and she's probably been in more super indies than most people have been having a 15-year career. So
yeah, very there's a lot of great talent, as Chris was bringing up. Like, there's so many people that you could watch on the scene today, and it'll sometimes like boggle your mind how the person isn't signed or hasn't been given a look yet. And sometimes it's just that right moment. It clicks and you're like, wow, everything came together for that person. So I would just say follow the independent wrestlers that you like, Azan, and support them too. Like, honestly, go out there and make sure that you're buying a t-shirt, that you're showing some love at a show. Go to the shows. That's what helps keep the shows coming into your town in that local area. Podcast advice. What advice do you have for podcast or people doing podcasts, especially like the wrestling genre today? Because I feel like we're in an oversaturated market. I've been doing this since 2015, 2016 on a consistent basis, and I feel like there's so many now. What can you do to stand out? I mean, what advice do you have for somebody?
I think you want to go for a unique idea, right? You want to do your research before you start. Is this idea different than people? If you just start a raw recap, well, there's hundreds of shows doing it, and some that have been doing it for years, and they've built up a fan base. So when you're promoting it, what's going to get those people to leave the podcast they've been listening to for 4 years to go, oh, I'm going to listen to that guy's raw recaps? Go with something different. There is still a lot of untouched ideas out there. Think of what's unique. There, like I said, there's TNA history podcast. Those do really good. Like, it's stuff you wouldn't think. Like, there's guys that I know that they just rewatch every Nitro. Like, it's that type of stuff. You can find a unique idea, and just run with it. My advice as far as getting it out there would be social media hustle. And if you just put a Facebook status, hey, listen to my show, your friends will listen to it, but your friends are going to listen to it. You want people outside your friends to listen to it. So you got to be Facebook groups. I found Facebook groups were much, much more important than I thought they would be. When I first started the Facebook group share, I just, for lack of better words, I spammed it a little bit, but putting out the link in every wrestling related or podcast related Facebook group. And then I noticed, I looked at the chartable ranks and I'm like, whoa, like 3,000-4,000 over a week, like extra listeners. Like, so the biggest thing is honestly, like, have a unique topic and then hustle on social media. And that if you have a unique topic, it's going to also stand out on social media too.
Chris Gullo knows what he's talking about, folks. Take your notes down. That was some free advice. I would also recommend be consistent too. Same day, same time. They know that they can always find you. It's always something good to get into. Now, you also work with Wrestlenomics. And I know some people may be saying, well, I've heard of that, but where is that from? Brandon Thurston is a local pro wrestler. I think he's still a pro wrestler here, because everybody sees his name now associated with Wrestlenomics, and they don't know that, Chris, you're like one of the background people. You're involved in this as well.
Yes.
He's just not getting these stats by himself, guys. He's got backup people. So what can you tell me about your role with Wrestlenomics?
Well, I will say this: Brandon does most of the heavy lifting. He is the spreadsheet master. He's constantly, doing his research to get the ratings out for all the programs, for Raw, SmackDown, AEW, Impact, Rampage, like I said, Dynamite. Even if there's any wrestling related stuff out there, he tries to get it all, like heels and stuff like that. So he's on top of that. He's on top of doing chart graphs and spreadsheets regarding financials of wrestling companies and TV rights deals. Actually, if you this Wrestlenomics coffee mug here, it has a breakdown of the television rights for SmackDown, Raw, and Dynamite.
Where can you get that cup, Chris?
So they're not for sale yet, but I've been trying to convince Brandon to put the Wrestlenomics coffee mugs on sale. So hopefully we'll have that. But so Brandon's doing a lot of I like to say he's the brains and the brawn of the operation, but I'll do a lot of social media sharing. Like, I'll do stuff on Facebook. I'll like share in the groups, like at the podcast. I'll do that for Wrestlenomics as well. Instagram and all that. And I'm his co-host on the Wrestlenomics radio podcast every Sunday, which we're part of the Post Wrestling Network, which is awesome. And yeah, so I kind of like, make it a conversation, bring up ideas from a fan, because I'll be the first to tell you, I'm not as smart as Brandon. Brandon's just got a million numbers on the top of his head. And I'll kind of say it from a relatable thing, like, well, Brandon, what about this from this perspective or that perspective? And I think we have really good chemistry. I've known Brandon for a long time. We used to host another podcast together. So
yeah. You and I really like the dynamic between you two when you're hosting it, because I feel like sometimes you can get too bogged down into the numbers, and then you kind of bring it back to reality from the things that I've seen with you guys together. Like, it's kind of like, hey, well, what about this fan perspective of it that you haven't mentioned yet? Like, are they completely wrong? And then usually Brandon will shut someone down with like illogical thinking or whatever they got going on. But I like listening to it. It helps just provide some in-depth background for when you're talking pro wrestling and you're trying to have an intelligent conversation about it versus I like this company and you don't.
It's a very exciting time.
Yeah. We go way back when it comes to that stuff, and we grew up with it, and then it disappeared for a long time. Yeah. And I have friends or other podcasters who I like do shows with, and they started watching during like that Ruthless Aggression time period. I'm like, dude, you just don't understand what I'm trying to tell you. Like, it's not the same. And they're just like, what happened to your love for WWE? Like, why don't you like it as much anymore? And I kind of try to explain how it used to be versus how it is, and then it slowly like has eroded away. I tell people WWE's like that girlfriend that like pushed you away, like when you were younger, and that's how I feel like it's treating me now. And I'm just like, oh, you guys just don't want me to watch this, I feel like. And I'm like, maybe it's not for me. I'm in that weird type of abusive cycle with it.
Variety and different avenues helps every single business. I always make the comic book analogy. Forever it was Marvel and DC, and that's great. But when Image started coming around and Dark Horse started coming around, and it got much more interesting, and the 90s comics exploded because you had all these other, and that's the beautiful thing about wrestling right now. WWE is out there, and they're out there with multiple brands themselves. But then you have AEW, then you have Impact, then you have NWA, you have MLW, Ring of Honor, and I say that because we'll see if they come back. But then you also, because we live in this social media culture, and I can message somebody living in all around the other side of the world in 10 seconds. You get New Japan Pro Wrestling, and you get AAA, and a lot of that. You can divulge stuff from all over. I don't know if you probably follow him, WrestleMap, Brian at WrestleMap. And this guy logs wrestling promotions from literally all over the world. Like, so if I want, I could just watch some deathmatch promotion from Poland. Like, it's just insane how wrestling is nowadays.
Yeah, even with and Powerslam.tv, you're getting a free plug here. There's even all those independent ones, and use
Yep.
our promo code EPW show 1 month free on us. I'm not even putting up the graphic, but you guys can get 1 free month of wrestling, and you can just get into so many different things. And that's the best part, I think, about the variety that we have the access to today. And Rob agrees about Dark Horse Comics. He's a big fan. He said it should get much more love than it gets. So many things to love and to hate about pro wrestling sometimes, but usually I like to ask somebody about the business part of it. So I enjoy how you guys put the business spin on pro wrestling when it comes to Wrestlenomics. Yeah. I've been doing it since I've been doing business classes since high school, and it really impresses my thinking. Is there something that you try to teach fans when you talk to them about pro wrestling, about the business side of things, like they don't understand, or do you let fans stay in their fan lane when you're talking pro wrestling?
I mean, I was, I'm a fan still to this day, but I mean, I started as a fan, and if you really have a real interest in that stuff, I mean, I'm always an open resource, and I don't know everything myself, but I think the thing with that I try to convey is that just because you see something on social media, like a line or like if Dynamite only does 880,000, viewers, or Raw only does 1.3 million, it's literally not the end of the world. We're living in a sports TV, live TV rights era where the numbers that they're getting, yeah, they're not the same viewers that we're watching in 1998, but in today's world, it's a much more profitable enterprise. So, like, for example, people can complain about WWE's creative, but they're linking 200 million deal year here, 250 million year here, like they're just so many rights deals.
The show last night, everybody kept tweeting out those pictures of, oh, look, there's no fans here. And I'm just like, do you guys understand that they made more money than they've ever made before? They have so many avenues where they're bringing cash flow in, whether it's from a government, whether it's from social media, sponsorships, the Pizza Hut deal. I would love to know how much Pizza Hut paid for that sponsorship on the paper.
I put it this way. I'm like the rest of the fans. Creatively, zombies and golden eggs, what are we doing? But you have to remember, they're getting a lot of money for that stuff. And I think that's what I like, and I'm not like defending any companies on that, or against any companies on that. But that's one of the things I try to convey, is that there's more than just what you're seeing on TV. There's a lot of business side of things and all that. And that golden egg thing, yeah, it was ridiculous. Let's just be real. But they probably got a lot of money on that.
I say this though. I wasn't even mad that they did the golden egg thing. Kind of expected it once I saw, like, okay, Red Notice was sponsoring it, but explain what it is. Like, I hadn't seen the movie yet. My friends were just like, yeah, you should check this out. I'm like, okay, if I get some free time, I'll check the movie out on Netflix or whatever. And they're like, it's corny, but you'll get into it. If you like rock movies, you'll get into it. It's the same thing. And I didn't understand. He's coming out with an egg, and everybody's like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, what is this? And it took me a minute until somebody was like, that's from the movie. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, good job explaining. Sometimes they miss those points with it. And I was just like, frustrated from that standpoint. Like, tell me what it is. And yeah, creatively, they may not be doing the best stuff right now, but they're making a lot of money. And that's what I guess it comes down to. It's a business at the end of the day. That's what I have to remind myself. It's business. That's what they have to do.
Still not the most iconic egg at Survivor Series, though. The gobbledygooker will always win that one.
Shout out to Hector Guerrero. So what upcoming projects are you working on right now? Is there anything that you can share with us that's in the works, maybe?
I mean, right now, I have a really healthy schedule of ring announcing. I'm at Empire State Wrestling, which we have a show this Saturday night, which I'll plug before we're all done here. Been working for them. I'm working for Excite Wrestling out of Johnson City, which, Excite Wrestling it's definitely under the radar. People should check that out. Because of where it is geographically, it's only a few hours from Buffalo, only a couple hours from Rochester, only a few hours from Philadelphia, New York, New Jersey. You get this like a genesis of talent from all over, and it's a really, really cool place. You got people like Bill Collier from this area, but then you got LSG from New Jersey and stuff. So I work for them. I work for NFW in New Jersey, run by Cody Jenny. Very cool promotion. You see a lot of the young rising stars in the independent scene in there. I'm working for Upstate Professional Wrestling in Rochester. A bit of independent wrestling staple in Western New York and Rochester for years, and finally part of them. And they got a great young roster from the Flower City Wrestling Academy that have come up and really took and, to use Vince McMahon's words, the brass ring and ran with it. Yeah. So, and there are some couple other promotions I've been talking about making my debut with. I also involved with MMA and kickboxing right now. Kickboxing, I work with Lisa Promotions. MMA, I work with Ground Force Fights. I got the 2 podcasts, and right now that's where we're at. Things always come down the pike. There was some video game project. Well, there is a video game coming out called Indie Pro 22 on Steam, and I'm going to be one of the characters you can choose there. There's hundreds of characters, so I'm not super special, but yeah. So, I do see this question here, and I will definitely answer that.
Oh, you just saw the one that popped up?
Yes.
Let's see here. I'm going to go to Rob real quick. He says, I know Corny isn't the most popular guy around these parts, but all his BS aside, he's an excellent numbers guy and the business side of things and untouched history buff, in my opinion. Jim Cornette is fascinating. I mean, Chris, you can give your opinion first.
I mean, here's the thing. If Jim Cornette is talking about what happened in 1989, under Jim Herd, I'm all ears. He wants to break down the business, how draws went down, all that. I don't really want to hear his takes on current wrestling. That's just me. I don't agree with them. It's just, it is what it is.
Yeah. The business evolves once it comes down to it. What's up, Ray? Ray from Hog Wrestling. He used to do some stuff out there for them. Thank you for the love, my brother. I appreciate it. Yeah. So that whole indie scene, I got a friend Tiff. She does Indie Wrestling Corner. She covers a lot of the stuff out in New Jersey, New York City, and like you said, that's really good stuff. And when you brought up Excite, is that the promotion where Silver and Reynolds would go to even from time to time and wrestle there?
Yep.
You guys never know who's going to pop up at some of these independent shows, so I would highly recommend it as well.
Ethan Page and Davey Richards on the next one on Saturday, December 3rd. So,
and I haven't seen Davey in a while. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've seen him in anything other than MLW so far. So I may have to try to check that out.
He was actually just at ESW back in October against Daniel Garcia in the main event. That was awesome.
Yeah, Garcia's the man. I'm actually so happy for him to get this like spotlight shine on him. I just love that Buffalo wrestling is just, or forget Buffalo, the upstate New York wrestling is just getting this light shined on them from like Brody Lee, Beth Phoenix, Angelina Love, like people who've all come through here, Butcher Blade. I could go on with all the names, but it's just so good. And I think there's so many people who are really good who haven't even been seen yet. So I would really recommend people do that. This is the question.
Yeah.
This is the question.
All right,
go ahead. This is all yours. Any thoughts on the XPW revival out in Rochester?
So give a little back history. I covered 9 hours of XPW on Rediscover the Indies. We did about a 9-hour deep dive, multiple parts, altogether 9 hours on XPW. Rob Black is a very, very interesting individual.
Very much
for lack of better words. Roster wise, match wise, it didn't look like the XPW that we all know. Do I think like Rochester or this area was probably the best idea for him to start? Maybe not, because at the end of the day, he was a deathmatch promotion. They did crazy stunts. You can't do that in New York with the Athletic Commission. So I'm interested to see XPW when it runs in California to see how that goes.
Yeah, that's because they were West Coast back then. That should be crazy. XPW to me is that company that used to have a bunch of DVDs in FYE in the local store. And I'm like, $5. I'm like, what could go wrong with this? What am I watching? This is not like ECW at all.
Yeah,
And
that was crazy. He got in there. Like, and that's the thing. Like, so XPW was on Dark Side of the Ring, and Dark Side of the Ring did a good job, but there was some stuff that we covered that they didn't talk about. That's just so interesting about. Like, so yeah, the DVD deal. WWE couldn't get into some places, and XPW was like in stores. And I think like some of the crazy stories was, so when he wanted to go to the East Coast, he bought the exclusive rights to the ECW arena. He was supposed to have him for at least a year, I guess. So Ring of Honor couldn't run there, CCW couldn't run there, 3PW couldn't run there. And he ran like one show and then couldn't afford to keep paying the lease to have him for the rest of the year. Stop paying.
Yeah, that's wild, man. And you know what's the crazy part? He probably had a lot of like probably had like a foot in the door. Well, something else, honestly, in the door to get those DVD deals. So just they have a crazy history. If you guys don't know it, definitely check out Chris's work on Rediscovering the Indies. Mounty's Corner, he said, sup, who would Chris want to introduce the most if you had to choose, past and present?
Oh, so past probably, well, this is a good question. Probably Eddie Guerrero. Eddie Guerrero would have been cool. I find myself, I'm a WCW kid when it's all said and done, and especially the cruiserweight division was like my favorite thing. And I've gotten to ring announce Ultimo Dragon, which is just absolutely phenomenal. But Eddie Guerrero would have been very cool to ring announce, you know. And as far as present, there's a few people that I'm like, I hope soon. You know, they're more like legends that are still working, but Juventud Guerrera, I want to ring announce, as well as Psychosis. But I think if we're going current, I think this is like, I think Roman Reigns and Kenny Omega. I'm just gonna go that big. I've never ring announced either of those, so
that would be absolutely wild. Chris, now usually before I let you get out of here, I like to play a game. We always do it where I'll just name some things. You can tell a story. You can give an answer to something. So the first thing I have down here is Howard Finkel.
Inspiration, one of the best. And it's not just ring announcing. Howard would watch stuff from other products and let Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard and all those guys know what was going on. The Finkel Report, they called it. And Howard was just like a true fan and really wanted what's best for the business. And I try to walk in his footsteps when it comes to that. I know people look at me and they call me Little Fink because the way I look. And I'm not trying to copy anybody's style. It's just I happen to be bald. But Howard Finkel is one of my inspirations. Gary Michael Capetta, David Penzer are up there as well. But yeah, Howard Fink was probably the best.
Right. I'm going to pop in some questions here if they keep popping up. Mounty wants to know, did you announce Ultimo Dragon with all of his titles at once?
Unfortunately, I did not. He did not have any of his belts, and I would have loved to do that. So
yeah, I was at if it's the same show that happened a couple years ago, I was at the show where he was announced actually. And you were ring announcing on that card, I remember. I think that was the one with MJF and everybody.
Yeah. So it was Ultimo Dragon teaming up with Cheech and Colin Delaney, 2 Infinity Beyond, versus 2 Butchers and a Blade, which was the Butcher and Blade from AEW, and then Bateman from Ring of Honor. So
that'd be an interesting team, actually, now that I think about it. But I digress. So next I have on the list, Andre the Giant.
I mean, legend. Would have been cool to meet him. Unfortunately, like, he passed way too young, and but yeah, legend for sure.
Karaoke song, if you were going up right now on stage, and you know why I'm asking this, it's only because I've seen a video. So what would be your go-to karaoke song?
The only song I get standing ovations with, weirdly enough, OMC How Bizarre.
Okay.
If you ask anybody, they know it's my go-to.
It's his jam. Kevin Bennett
should have a contract for a television promotion. Kevin, yes, full disclosure, Kevin's a friend of mine. But if you've ever watched a guy wrestle, he should be wrestling on television every week.
Kevin is friends with a friend of mine, and I think Kevin is one of the most dynamic wrestlers. And he's actually been on SmackDown. He's been on many shows, AEW Dark, I believe, as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen him wrestle, really good. Type in the remix Kevin Bennett. Really good guy. Like, I absolutely enjoy his stuff. Your favorite actor or actress in films? You can actually do both.
Well, actor. That's kind of it's kind of a tough question. Probably like Larry David and Seth Rogen for a tie. As far as actress, big Lily Tomlin fan. Love Lily Tomlin, and I think I'm more of a current day. Emily Blunt. Anything Emily Blunt's in, I'll watch.
Okay. Next up, The Butcher and the Blade.
I mean, like, first off, very happy for both those guys. But I'd like to consider them friends. They're great. They were always great to me. I've been on their podcast when they had a podcast. They do the wrestling at the Tid the Season event every year, and they've asked me to be part of that a few times, which is awesome. But great guys, happy for them. But I'd like to see them win some tag team gold in AEW.
I think the day will eventually end up coming for them. I keep explaining to people, old school reference here, but I feel like they're going to be like the Acolytes. There's going to be some team that everybody loves. They're like, yeah, they're going to get a nice long title run one night on Dynamite. Boom, full blade, and we'll have new champs. That's just a prediction that I've been saying for a long time. Next up, I have AEW as a whole.
Great for the wrestling business. Another place for guys to work. Another place for exposure. We talked earlier in this podcast about there's so much great independent talent. I mean, we remember watching wrestling shows when we were young, and there would be the enhancement talent in the ring, and it's like the guy looked like he was a plumber, and like you never knew who these guys were, and they'd get beat up in 2 seconds. And now it's like, oh, I'm gonna flip on AEW Dark, and the guy that's the enhancement talent is Ricky Shane Page.
Yeah.
They're giving exposure and giving a lot of great independent wrestlers, an opportunity, and then gets their name out, and then more indie promotions want to book them. And so I think AEW is now competing with WWE for TV rights deals. That's going to go down a couple of years. I think it's great for the business, and not just the competition wise with WWE, but I think the open door policy they're doing other promotions as well as what they're doing, for the independent wrestling talent.
Feels more like an independent contractor should feel, in my opinion. Justin Roberts.
One of the best. Just Rob's one of the best out there. He's been consistently great for a long time.
Absolutely love him. And Thanksgiving, what does that mean to you? What are you thinking about this?
It's just kind of nice to see family and friends. I mean, for me, for Thanksgiving, it's crazy to think. I know when Thanksgiving's coming up, Wrestle Bash is usually coming up, and it's my favorite show of the year for Empire State Wrestling because it's like our WrestleMania. So when I know it's Thanksgiving time, I'm gonna have some Thanksgiving, which I'm a vegan, so I'm gonna have some vegan turkey, watch some football, and then it's put up Christmas decorations, and then it's time to get ready for Wrestle Bash. So that's what the holiday means to me.
I love it. I've got some questions here from Twitter. The first one comes from Super Beast at Monstrosity13. I was told, I hope they ask him about the time he ducked me in a game of Boggle.
Shenanigans. So back in Pier 6 Wrestling, Super Beast, who was the Pier 6 Wrestling Heavyweight Champion, I think he still is. The company hasn't ran in like 7 years, but I think he's still the champion. He challenged me to a game of Boggle, and I accepted his challenge. I even bought Boggle, and he never played me. He always came up with excuses, and I always try to make the stakes interesting, and he would never agree to them. So that is a false question. Super Beast has been ducking me on Boggle.
We've got the latest scoop here. When the grudge match happens, we'll try to see if we can stream it live here on Everything Pro Wrestling. I'll see if I can secure the rights for that. And somebody asked, With Chris being an anagram of I scroll, what social media platform do you find yourself scrolling through mindlessly?
Probably Facebook. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, it's
Right. Soon to be Meta.
no.
And Rob's got a question here. On the subject of Fink, I have an interesting question. What is your favorite and new announcement from him? My personal favorite is when Kane won the belt at the King of the Ring 1998. I was actually watching that show with you.
Wow,
I remember that day.
That's good because there's so many. I mean, Austin winning the belt in '98 at WrestleMania is pretty cool event. Actually, because it's the anniversary that's been popping up. When WWF won, now listen, the Invasion storyline wasn't good. I'm not here to defend it, but when The Rock won and Team WF beat the Alliance, that was a pretty cool Finkel announcement.
Yeah, that was. Fink's the man. Like, I just love the dude. Just he was just a staple of like what the old school WWF was, and the voice is iconic. I even laugh when I can't remember which one of the Good brothers always ends up doing the voice. I think it's Gallows. He can do a great Howard Finkel impression, and it just makes me smile every time I hear it. But Chris, what do you have to promote coming up? If you want to put any of your podcast links out there, throw whatever you want at the wall so the people know where to find you.
All right, so just currently upcoming this Saturday, Empire State Wrestling. If you're anywhere near the Western New York area, or it's worth the drive, Niagara Falls, New York, at the Frontier Fire Hall, ESW Wrestle Bash. I have the pleasure of ring announcing this event. In our main event, it's going to be Daniel Garcia, AEW's Daniel Garcia, defending his ESW heavyweight title against Kevin Blackwood, who just made his Pro Wrestling Guerrilla debut. So he's blowing up. He just moved to the West Coast. He's blowing up, but he's coming home for Thanksgiving and he's going to try to become ESW heavyweight champion while he's at it. We also have the Elio DePaula Memorial Cup match, which it's in tribute to Elio DePaula, and it usually takes 6 stars in the independent scene in the area. And we got Vince Valor from Niagara Falls in that, Big Time Bill Collier, Facade, KTB, Josh Alexander, and Matthew Raywold, who you may know as Aiden English from WWE, is in that. We also got Tony Deppen versus Jay Freddy, Kevin Bennett versus Vinnie Moon. We have Jeremiah Richter versus Frankie Feathers for Frankie's ESW Interstate title. There is Danny Moe is going one-on-one with Christina Marie. And I know I'm forgetting some stuff. There's the team Jerk Cockett versus Team James Saga match going on, like Survivor Series style. And I feel like I'm forgetting. I should know the whole card. Tag team matches. Yes, Money Shot from the Pittsburgh area were rising against To Infinity and Beyond, and then PME, who you may know from AIW, going against High Seas Cheech and Cloud. Cloudy and Ando, and then of course To Infinity Beyond's Cheech and Colin going against Money Shot. So yeah, there's a lot of great matches for that. Also tomorrow actually will be the premiere of our last part of the NWA title from 2007-2017 on Rediscovering the Indies. So check that out. We're on Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcasts, all that. But we break down the sale of the NWA to Billy Corgan and what all that entailed, and some interesting things. The Houston Wrestling Library was involved, and we also take a brief detour to Billy Corgan's Resistant Pro Wrestling, which was one of the first super indies that no one ever talks about. You should see how star-studded these shows were. But yeah, so we got that coming up, and then Wrestlenomics is every Sunday. You can find us on the Wrestlenomics feed. Patreon Wrestlenomics, only $5 a month, and you get exclusive, not only emergency broadcasts, but you get the ratings before everybody else, and you get charts and graphs. It's only $5 a month, but every Sunday we have a new Wrestlenomics radio, which you can find on the feed or just find in any podcasting feed or through Post Wrestling. And then next week, Saturday, I'll be at Excite Wrestling in Johnson City. And like I said, the Ethan Page will be there, Davey Richards will be there, and much more. So a lot of other stuff coming down the pike, but I won't just keep listing on and on.
Make sure you guys check out Chris. But before we go, Rob has submitted another question. One more question: favorite dish at DePaulo's?
I full disclosure, I haven't been there since I've been vegan for a couple of years. But before I was vegan, probably like some chicken parm.
That seems like the layup answer.
But
That's what I would have said.
Before I was vegan, I gotta let the I don't need somebody trying to cancel me for the vegan culture. Oh, he ate chicken parm before I was vegan.
Fickle.
Yes.
Yes, but definitely check out Chris and everything that he does. And I do want to say this. It was an honor to get you on the podcast today. I like supporting people from the local area, people who do wrestling. And like I said, go check out his comedy. Check out some of the movies he's been in. He's done a lot of stuff, and I think you're an inspiration for people who do want to get into media, entertainment, and things like that. So, Chris, thank you so much, and definitely worthy of a Hall of Fame induction going forward for all the work that you've done, man. So thank you guys so much. Make sure you check out Chris's links. They'll be down in the description below. And everybody for listening, thank you. And we will see you tomorrow with our review of AEW Dynamite. Take care, everyone.